Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Career Growth Podcast. I am your host, Angel, today. If you are new here, welcome and please get comfortable. This podcast is here to give you early career advice and industry insights so you can take your career to the next level. For this week's episode, we want to discuss career mistakes. Recently, the marketing team has been digging through the internet trying to find career mistakes everywhere, and we found so many interesting stories. And that's why we want to share them with you and discuss them with you here today. And I probably am going to make the biggest career mistakes in my entire career. Well, it's been 2.5 years. It's been long. But I invited my boss, Vinay, CEO of Capital Placement, to join us today in this discussion. Vinay, hi, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Angel. It's good to be here. Super excited for this one. Obviously, as someone who's made a plenty of mistakes, I think I'm super excited to share some of them and go through other people's mistakes. It's always nicer watching someone
Mm.
else and like reading about other people's mistakes, right? Rather than your own one. So
Um,
quite keen to see this one.
well, I guess so. But the thing is, Vinay, you were the previous host of the Capital, sorry, not the Capital, Career Growth podcast. You
Mistake
were the
number
host.
one.
How does it?
Ding ding.
How does it? Well, guys, it's definitely a mistake that I made by inviting Vinay. I would try to host the entire podcast, but I would feel like I probably will abandon the recording halfway through. So if you don't get to the end of it, you know why. But yeah, Vinay, how does it feel like to get back to the podcast? It's been like, I don't know, 2 years for you.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years. I think, I think it was a very different time when we did the podcast previously.
Mm.
And so, yeah, it's super nice to come back. It feels nice to kind of have a conversation, and hopefully there'll
Mm.
be something interesting for our listeners to listen to as well. So, super excited for this one.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to our debates because I know that we'll have different opinions for different things,
I hope
especially for
so.
some of the so-called mistakes. So
I
yeah,
hope
I hope
so.
so too. So yeah, guys, if you're just starting out your career, landing your first job, you will make mistakes, and we all do, right? And it's okay because today you're gonna learn from other people's mistakes, probably from our mistakes, because we're going to share our mistakes at the end of the episode. So stay tuned for that. And we want to talk about how you can avoid them and how you can, if you make them, proactively addressing them. So let's start with what is what are career mistakes, because it's a really broad range. Vinay, can you share us some examples of like career mistakes? Maybe talking
Thanks
with
for
colleagues,
putting
maybe
me on the spot.
communications.
Thanks for putting me on
What
the
are some of
spot
the
there.
examples?
No, thank you so much for putting me on the spot. I feel like this is an area
Mm.
where the host can come in and tell us what a
You
career
can't
mistake.
reverse. You can't.
I'll try to
Reverse card
reverse this
me.
back onto you.
Yeah,
So,
okay. How about this? I will give three examples, and then you give three examples
okay,
of career
sure.
mistakes.
Okay,
Okay.
sure. Sounds good.
I would say for me it's probably communications with your colleagues,
Okay.
because I feel like it's really different from how you normally interact with other people in your life, like your friends, if you're new, like if you are, if this is your first job, talking to your friends, talking to your parents, talking to your professors, it's a different way of like to talking and communicating with your colleagues. So I guess that could be one of the mistakes people can make
Okay.
when they are
Are you
starting out the
speaking from
career,
experience here?
communications. So the next mistakes I think people might
Swiftly
make.
moving on.
Yeah, moving on. The second one is probably, I'll probably say, hitting deadlines, because at uni sometimes you don't hit your deadlines. That's fine, but when you are working, not hitting your deadlines is kind of like a big deal, and some people don't take it that seriously and they made a mistake, and it just kind of accumulates and accumulates and accumulates. So I guess hitting the deadlines, like I am a huge deadline believer, and if our team members
I
isn't
believe
hitting
you. I
deadlines,
believe you.
we have a very serious conversation. But I guess I think, yeah, hitting deadlines. What is another one? Can you, Vinay, help me out here? What
I
what
thought you said
what
you were
are
going to give
other
us three. We
mistakes?
only got two. I got shortchanged.
Okay, I need to think about it. Can you give two, and I'll share my three.
Sure. I think if I was speaking from experience, I think not investing enough into my own learning and development early on in my career is definitely one of the mistakes
Mm,
that I did. I think
mm,
the growth trajectory that you go through in your 20s is quite steep, and
Mm.
uh, not realizing that, I think I wish I knew that I would. It's okay to make a lot more mistakes than what I was aware. I think I was afraid of making some of the mistakes, so that actually prevented me from going through some of that growth journey. So I can't remember who said this, but someone said basically you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So,
Oh, true. Okay.
but once I realized that, I
Mm.
think that was quite a really interesting mistake to kind of be aware of. So anyone that's
Mm.
listening, I think in your late teens into your 20s, I think your colleagues, your bosses, people around you will be a lot more tolerant to you perhaps making mistakes and learning from it than if you do those in your 30s and 40s. So I think there's a lot of
Mm.
things that you learn from failure, I guess, or if I use the word failure in inverted commas,
It's a big
it's
word,
it is.
failure.
It is. It comes with such a negative connotation where it doesn't really
Mm.
have to. So
Mm.
it's a bit like a child learning to grow. So I have a daughter now who's trying to learn how to walk, and then they fall along the way, and
Mm.
then they pick themselves
Mm.
up. They keep doing it. They keep trying, and
Mm.
they have this incredible motivation. So even if they fall, they slip, they'll just like carry on, basically, as if
Mm.
like they don't even think about it. And I think um, I wish more people had that childlike mentality when it comes to mistakes, where it's part of your learning or it's part of your career growth. So 100%, I think so. Learning your own learning and development, and I think
Mm.
being more forgiving to yourself for the mistakes will be the two. So I'm going to match the two that you said, and then if you give me a third one, I'll give you a third one.
I was gonna say that I feel like most people might lean towards focusing on them making a mistakes, then what can we do about it, and maybe taking action points of
Yeah,
addressing them. I had that, and I'm gonna share that later because Vinay knows all of my mistakes. He calls me out. What can I say?
that
But
doesn't
yeah, at the
make me sound
beginning,
too good. I don't just call you
you
out on it.
you call you out. You call me out, but you also help me through them, which is great. But at the beginning, obviously, your first few mistakes, I feel like I focus on like, oh my god, why did I make the mistakes? I was so stupid. I shouldn't have done that. And I think about, why did that happen? Focus too much about making the mistakes, and
Exactly. That's the journey that I went on, and that's what I want to talk. That's what
mm,
exactly what I was trying to say. I think you're a lot more self-critical. You focus more on the
mm,
mistake rather than actually the learnings and moving on from that.
mm,
Because um, it's a bit like when there's a problem, there are a lot of people that focuses a lot on the actual problem rather than
mm,
focusing on the solution. So they spend all their time, effort, and energy worrying about the problem and just go around in circles, and it's just a downward spiral. Where if you actually just focus on the solution, and
mm,
okay, the problem's happened, or like you have that problem, you can't change that now. So let's focus on what we can change, and that's the solution. And if you focus on that, you'll just get out of that much quicker. So I 100% agree. In terms of like
mm.
early on in my career, I think very self-critical, but also I think critical of others as well and their mistakes. I think failing to realize that that's actually part of the growth journey is something that I think I wish I knew earlier.
Yeah, one thing that you did was to ask me what I'm doing with them. And I made the same mistake so many times. We're going to talk about it later. But you did say, like, what are you doing with them? And shift my focus towards the tools I could use, or like maybe a methodology that I can take, and an approach I can take at work to help me avoid them.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like you help me to focus on, what I can do and some of the solutions, and some of the actions I can take every day to avoid mistakes, instead of focusing too much about how I feel. But obviously, like the first few times, it's unavoidable. You do
No,
feel
that's
you're
the thing.
upset,
I
having a
think
crying break.
I think no, a lot of people can
Mm,
relate to that because I think
mm,
everyone has usually. I don't want to say everyone, but vast majority of people have very high standards for themselves, and I think when you kind of fail to meet that, the standards that you set for yourself, I think you eventually become your own biggest critic, and I
mm,
think that's good because it helps you raise the bar and it helps um, not settle for mediocrity, but
mm,
that doesn't mean that you beat yourself every time you make a mistake. There are times where you just genuinely, there's nothing else you could have done. In a different world, you would have done the exact same thing and you would have probably ended up
Mm.
making the exact same mistake, but there's nothing else that you could have done in that situation.
Yeah.
And, but the most
Can't change
important,
the past.
can't change the past. And I think I genuinely believe that if I was to give like a work example, not everything is like kind of binary where it's like a mistake and not a mistake. I think there's things in between. It's almost like a
Mm.
spectrum, and every time you make a decision, there's so many factors that go into making a decision. It might just seem like something trivial, but in the back of your mind, there's so many things you're considering. Let's just take a
Mm.
very simple thing such as like what to wear today to work, as an example. When you're thinking about picking out an outfit, you're probably thinking, okay, what's the weather like today? What's my diary like today? Who am I meeting today? How do I need to present myself today? All of these things are going on in the background. These are just some of the things. I'm not even talking about, what
Yeah.
accessories do I need to wear with this? What coat am I wearing today? Is it cold? Is it
Mm.
warm? Is it this, that? There's so many other factors, but you make that decision and it happens in a split second. But there are things that are happening in the background. It's the exact same thing at workplace as well. There's a lot of decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis, but along the way, some of that information is perfect that you make the decision on the back of. You have the information. Depending on your role, there's a lot of roles where you don't have perfect information. So you're assuming
Mm.
a lot of things. And
Mm.
that assumption is based on experience and just your knowledge. So, but along the way, one wrong assumption or one wrong piece of information could lead to a very different outcome. But what I generally tend to focus on is, okay, mistake is done. I first try and solve that problem. Once I solve it, I try and look back at where did my assumptions go wrong, or where did that mistake start, basically, and then try and make sure that I kind of take a mental note of it. So if I'm in that same position again next time, my intuition would kind of like push me to another direction because I can recall from what I've gone through. So I think just wish that more people, I think that's like one thing that I'll definitely recommend to listeners to kind of like focus on, which is try and understand which one of your assumptions went wrong and not beat yourself over it, but just understand, okay, that piece of information or that assumption was wrong. And then
Mm.
just kind of make a mental note of what the right one would have been in that instance.
I really like what you said. You said intuitively knowing what to do next, because it's almost impossible for you to remember every single thing that happened. Like it has to you have to implement it into your daily life, your work life, so that you don't repeat them. And then once the scenario happens, then you will like intuitively make that
Big
decision.
word.
um,
No, you
Right.
said it right.
So the next part that we're moving into is reading Reddit stories, which is mistakes other people's made. Well, are they mistakes? Are they not mistakes? Is it just funny? Should we expand on it? Let's get
Can I
into
just
it.
take a second to acknowledge Reddit? Like, it's a rabbit hole that I try to
Mm,
stay away from.
mm,
It's a fascinating world. It's
it
just
is.
so funny.
The
But yeah, I
thing
just want to
is,
give a massive shout out to Reddit.
Vinay, we didn't choose, we told you yesterday, we didn't choose the spiciest of the spiciest content because we still want this job. It would be great if you tell the entire world that I won't get fired by discussing these with you. Um, would you
It's
please?
Yeah, of course. I think. Well, let us know if you think this is too PG. Let us know. If you want things that are spicier, just let us know. We could do like a part two to this.
A
Let the
spicier
listeners decide.
version of it. Yeah. I'm gonna put a Q&A on this episode, and you can let us know if you want to have spicier content.
Sure.
But with the Reddit stories that we have selected today, they are still in a middle zone of debatable.
Okay.
So let's get
Uh,
into it.
I'm keen.
Yeah. So, right, the first one, I'm gonna read it. Is from a deleted account from a year ago. I'm not sure why someone would delete their account just, a year apart. But here we go. I worked the full 8 hours and felt guilty AF for slacking off. Realistically, 4 to 6 hours is the maximum amount of effective work in any field that involves actual thinking. What do you think, Vinay?
Um, I could see where this person's coming from. I think, especially early on in your career, where there are other things that you also want to do, like spending 8 hours of work might not be very appealing to a lot of people. But in my experience, what I realized is there's outsized returns when you work past 8 hours. And I'm not, by no means am I encouraging people to do, crazy hours every week, day in, day out. All I'm saying is, in my personal experience, what I realized is if I do 60-hour a week, as an example, what I'm doing is I'm probably doing 50% more than what anyone else in my age group is doing. And what that meant was I make a lot more mistakes, but also learn from a lot of mistakes. So if just extrapolating that data like crazy, so over 5 years, where if I started working when I was 21 and at the age of 26, I would have had 7.5 years worth of experience compared to 5 years experience compared to some of my peers. So that is just crazy extrapolation. But what I'm trying to say is that that's a lot of information, and there's a lot of things that you would have picked up in your 20s, which will really set you up in your 30s and 40s. I know I'm fully aware that a lot of people like Jack Ma, there are other entrepreneurs who have advocated for like really, really long work hours. I'm not saying that's good. But what I am saying is that 8 hours in the grand scheme of things is not that much. I think if you actually time yourself, unless you work in an office which has very strict work hours, especially us as a company, we were remote first and we have a lot of flexibility. We often end up working a lot more than 40 hours a week, as an example. So I think most people actually do work more than 8 hours a day. They just don't realize it. Whether that's actual productive time, that's a whole other debate. Because, during work, we might have other things that we do, as an example. So like, you might take 20 minutes for a personal call. You might have like an hour long lunch break, etc., etc. And I think there's numerous studies around this where there are certain studies which shows that you can only concentrate for 60 minutes a day. Like absolute pure concentration is only about 60 minutes. And I think this study was done by a few sports psychologists. They said like 60 minutes is like the absolute peak concentration time that you can get. So but other studies have shown that at work, that could be 4 to 6 hours. So you can actually spend 4 or 6 hours and focus on work. But when you work 10 hours a day, there's no way that you're actually like physically working 10 hours without a break. The actual work time, and that's probably, best case scenario, 80% of that. Worst case scenario, 40 to 50%. If you're on that worst case scenario spectrum, end of that spectrum, you should really kind of ask yourself, if I actually increase that productive time, I could do it in a lot less hours. So that's perhaps something I'll focus on. But I don't think caring about your work is a bad thing. I fully understand that this is coming from a co-founder of a company, but genuinely caring, we have a lot of colleagues who do genuinely care about the work that they do. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It gives you passion. It gives you the drive to come to work and be motivated to come to work, to do the things that you've got to enjoy what you do. And caring about your work is not a bad thing by any means. Would you rather go under the knife of a surgeon who doesn't care about his patient, or would you want to go under the knife where the patient really does, the doctor, the surgeon really cares about the patient? There's a lot of examples of that where, especially in industries, or there are lots of examples that I can give where you're receiving a service from someone, having that receiving a service from someone that cares is very different to receiving service from someone who doesn't. Like if you go out for a meal, a waiter or a waitress that really cares about their work, that's passionate about the food, or a chef that's really passionate about the food, I can arguably say that you can taste the difference. From a chef that really cares about the food, the produce, the way it's cooked, and how the guest enjoys it, to someone who just follows a recipe blindly and just does not care. So I think I think caring is not necessarily a bad thing, but just like everything else, when you take it to the extreme, it can be quite difficult. But 8 hours is by no means the extreme end of any spectrum for work. What are your thoughts, Angel?
I don't I don't know, because I feel like would that depend on what you do? Because I feel like I would be lying if I say I can concentrate 8 hours, like for sure every day.
You
And
can't. You can't. But it's like it's that whole 40 to 80% range, right? So out of that 8 hours, like best case scenario, you're focused for 80% of that. Worst case scenario, 40, 50%. And yeah, so I fully understand where you're coming from.
yeah, 4 to 6 hours. And also like I don't know, because what you do, Vinay, is very different than what I do.
Mm.
For me, I need to get into longer discussion calls where sometimes it might take 3 hours. Shout out to Naren, another co-founder of ours. It takes 3 hours to maybe complete a landing page where we discuss almost every aspect of it. And then at the end of that call, I need to like step away,
Mm.
relax for a little bit, scroll my TikTok, come back to it, and I jump onto another project that has nothing to do with the previous one. It's almost like a pause between different projects so that I get a clearer mind into doing something else. And it's the thing about doing like me being marketing. A lot
Mm.
of projects are not, if you just in hindsight, not related to each other. So for me, sometimes I get on calls and sometimes I get in editing that takes about an hour and a half and look at all the
Yeah.
details, and it's really mentally draining, and then you need to take a break. So I feel like I don't want to feel guilty for not being able to say that I can't like work fully 8 hours.
I
Realistically,
can't. I
mm,
can't. I've been doing this for
you
11
can.
years.
Oh,
I
you
can't.
can.
I can't.
I feel like you can.
I can't. I
I feel like
definitely
you have a
can't.
way of like concentrate and like focus and be efficient all the time.
I
Or
do
is it
that in
just
spurs. Like I
mm,
go through sprints basically, but
no?
there's no way I can sit in this chair for 8 hours at a stretch where I'm working full time. I don't think so. So I would instead break my. So for me, what works really best is like doing sprints basically. So I try and do like
Mm,
either an hour to 2 long sprint, and that's it. And then I take a small break, whether that's like going
mm,
downstairs to get some coffee, come back, just clear my head basically. Um, and then I'll come back again, another an hour or two, and then come back. And then I might take a couple of hours after that. So as I said, like I have a daughter now. And for me, I spend some time with her in the afternoon, evening. We play. That just completely recharges my battery. So I think maybe at like 4 o'clock, my battery might be at like 20%, but spending like an
yeah.
hour or two with her, it goes to like 100%. And then I come back usually in the evening, like after nine
Mm,
o'clock to finish off the things, because after 9 o'clock, there's no one messaging me. So it's great. So that's where like my pure concentration
mm,
goes. And so if I need to
mm,
focus on creating a presentation, if I need to, anything that requires deep thought, I try and push that after 9 o'clock. But other things I try and do in like an hour or two. Again, it's
mm,
coming up with a system that works really well for you. But I think going back
mm,
to this person, I think what you said is 4 to 6 hours a day is what you can realistically do. I 100% agree with that. But the question here is, to get that 4 to 6 hours, does it take you an 8 hour workday or a 10 hour workday or a 12-hour workday? So for me, I might stretch my 6 or 7 hours worth of productive time over 12 hours to do it,
mm,
while other people might get that done in 10 hours. That's fine. And,
mm,
I'm a huge believer that you shouldn't really measure work based on the hours that you spend on it. It's more on the output rather than like the input. So input is the time that you put in, output is the work that you get out. So you
mm,
really shouldn't kind of try and quantify your work or look at the quality of your work based on what you input into that. I think
yeah. Mm,
it's a factor for your bosses to be mindful of, because
mm,
not everything happens. So like if you take an example of like drugs as an example, to create a new drug it might take close to a decade. But does that mean that there's just a whole bunch of people in a lab just sitting around? It's not. It just takes that long.
mm,
Some of the things just take a lot of time to do, and the result is one small tablet basically. It's one
yeah.
small tablet that took 10 years to get there. But you can't just define the output, which is that tablet, and you look at the input and it's like a team of like 30 people working for 10 years on it. And you're like, this is the outcome from that? Obviously it's not very fair.
Mm,
So I think it's something that they should be mindful of. But I personally believe in in the actual output and focus on that. So if you're someone that can do the work that takes your colleague 10 hours, but you could do it in 6 or 7 hours, fair play. Great.
yeah.
But what people
Mm,
don't realize is that person must have worked really hard previously, or they worked extra hours to get to a point where they could do it in 6 or 7 hours.
mm,
People don't see that. People don't see the effort that goes into it. So, as an example, if I use me and you as an example,
mm,
you might do a TikTok video in less than half an hour, scripted, recorded, edited, published. The same thing might take me 2 weeks. doesn't mean like, so it, you can't just look at the outcome, because that's what you do day in day out, and you spend a lot of time
Mm.
analyzing other videos, etc. You spend a lot of time sharpening your axe basically, and then you can
Yeah.
chop that tree in
Mm.
10 minutes. For me, I have a very blunt axe to start with, so I need to start sharpening, and it takes a long time to sharpen a blunt axe. So you can't, so this is what I mean,
Mm.
as in, you don't necessarily see the full picture always,
Mm.
and you've got to understand that some people are incredibly smart, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people do things because of the hard work that they put in over the years, where they might be working late, they spend that time reading, they might be reading about research papers, they might be looking into academic studies, they might be looking into like journals and all these knowledge that they pick up that help them do their job a lot more efficiently. So a lot of time and effort has gone into that, and people don't
Mm.
necessarily give you credit for that, but that's okay. You're the person that leaves office at like 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon, while your colleagues are there until 6, 7 o'clock. Fair play to you. Look at the output, not the input.
Yeah, true. True, true. And a lot more companies are more flexible about when you work and focus, and how many hours you work, and focus more on your output, which I think it's something CP does
Hmm.
as well. I hope that's how I feel, at least
That's good,
in the
I
marketing
think.
department. Um, moving on to the next Reddit. The second Reddit story is from Kenju313. This person says, saying yes to things you weren't sure about. If you don't know, it's okay to say you got to get back to them on that, especially whether you think you can get something done on time.
Do you want to
What
start
do
with
you think,
this?
Vinay?
I would love to
I would
see.
like to. I can start. I can
Okay,
start.
I think you
I
should
feel
start with
like
this one.
I feel like if this is like your first job, especially if you're an intern, you really want to impress people, right?
Hmm.
You really want to impress your manager, your supervisor, especially like, well, at least for me, when I was an intern, the job that I get wasn't the hardest. If let's say if I study to the 100% capacity of what I can possibly learn about, I wouldn't say 100%, let's say 50. What I get to do at my first job or as an intern is probably like 10%, because they want you to see how you are doing a
Hmm.
particular job in that particular company, within that industry, in that sector, or stuff like that. So you get to learn more about applying your knowledge into that sector than actually applying to a general knowledge on everything. So I understand the mentality of wanting to impress your manager and wanting to say yes to everything.
Hmm.
um but I can see how that could, you know what is the word,
Bite you in the ass.
fire. Similar, but I can see how people struggle with starting with saying yes and then slowly realize they can't do it and they have to say no afterwards, and then setting boundaries, and I feel like maybe they don't feel comfortable with it.
Yeah,
um
it's
yeah, that's how
interesting.
I feel.
Um, I'm on the same kind of pathway. I think from me looking at it from like an employer's perspective, what I would say is every single person is hired to solve a problem in the company,
Mm.
and ultimately it's not that the person, it's very unlikely that that problem can't be solved within the company. It just means that your colleagues perhaps don't have the time to do it, or uh, they're looking for someone who's better at that particular role, and so they're hoping that they hired you so that it can be done quicker. So with that context, if you go in and you start asking a lot of questions and it takes up your bosses or your colleagues' time, they might as well just do it themselves. And you don't want your bosses to feel that way. So that's one end of that's one possible scenario. The other possible scenario is you say yes to everything and you do a mediocre job that they just wish that you just spend an extra 2 or 3 minutes asking questions and getting some
Mm.
context or some information,
True.
and then
Mm-hmm.
doing it, because that extra 2 or 3 minutes could make the difference between you wasting, best case scenario, like a few minutes, worst case scenario, a few days, maybe even weeks on something where you just misunderstood the brief and you could just go down an entire different tangent, basically. So
Mm.
it's basically finding where on that spectrum that you should kind of be, because you don't want to be the person that takes too much of your colleagues' time, and you don't want to be the person that don't take any, but then end up making the mistake, and then it has to be redone again. It's a waste of everyone's time.
Mm.
So, just going back to the question, it's completely okay, and I think it's a great work culture is somewhere where you get encouraged to ask questions. They shouldn't feel like the worst place is if you feel like you're. Let me rephrase that. So, if you feel like asking questions makes you look stupid, you're probably in the wrong room, because asking questions is always a good thing, and you want to work in an environment where asking questions is encouraged. Again, like I said, you can ask a question for a minute or two, get a lot more clarity. In 2 minutes you can ask a lot of questions, you can get a lot of answers, and that gives you a lot more context, and you can go away, especially if it's a big task.
Mm.
You make sure that your time is efficiently spent on that, and then you can just get the results that you're looking for. So 100%. I think a lot of interns struggle because you kind of have to understand what the office is like. It's not one size fits all. There are certain
Mm.
colleagues or bosses that encourage colleagues to ask questions, and there are others that will just shun them basically. And they're like, oh,
So would you say, Vinay, would you say instead of saying no to a task, um, instead of keep saying yes to a task, which you are not sure about, you would encourage them to take task, but then ask the right questions so that they do it the right way.
I wouldn't. Yes, I wouldn't want to put pressure on them by saying asking the right questions. I think
Mm.
asking questions is probably is the way I would phrase it, because asking the right questions, you get better at asking questions the more you
Mm.
experience. I think early on in your career, I think just asking questions is good.
Mm.
And I think get used to thinking things through, because I think what a lot of people end up doing is they take a task and then they try and figure out how to do this. I think
Yeah.
really, really smart people, as they get given the task, they already start thinking, okay, like this is what I need to do. This is how I'm going to break it
Mm.
down. And once you kind of go through that mental exercise, so this is something that if you're interested in a career in consulting, you get very questions like market sizing questions. You get these kind of questions where you kind of have to think the answer through in your head, and then you do it.
Mm.
So just kind of like go through that kind of exercise in your head. Okay,
Mm.
your colleague says, let's launch, I don't know, a new product. Okay, so in that case, what are the things that you need to do to launch a product? You go through that, and then you start asking questions. But what you can do is have that framework in your head. It's a good thing. And then based on that, you can ask questions. So saying yes is definitely a good thing. Getting involved in a lot of different projects at work, absolutely great. Because being known as someone that is very resourceful in an office or in a company is a good reputation to have. So
Mm.
I wouldn't necessarily say no, but obviously be mindful of your own workload. Don't take on too
Mm.
much. But assuming
Mm.
that you have the bandwidth to do it, take on the projects. And when projects don't go well, just think back, where did it go wrong? Again, going back to what I said, you made some assumptions along the way that just wasn't correct. So
Mm.
if there's something that you can learn from it, great. So maybe you realize from your previous experience that maybe you just need to take a step back and ask a few questions. And
Mm.
like, your boss might be running down the corridor while they give you this task. Just say, okay, that's fine. I can see you're super busy. Can I pick this up with you in a few minutes once you finish with your next meeting or something? Or
Mm.
when you're next grabbing a coffee, I just have a few questions. Just let me know when you're free. I'll do this, and it won't take more than 2 minutes. And then make
Mm.
sure you go into that prepared. So you go through that framework, you understand, you have all the questions that you want to ask, have that structured. That's assuming a
Mm.
worst case scenario where you only have a minute or two. Usually,
Mm.
you probably generally have a bit more than that. So you can still go through that exercise of kind of what needs to be done, and then going to your colleague and asking those questions in detail and getting that information. So, and colleagues
Mm.
will respect you for that, because again, a lot of people think asking questions or not knowing answers makes you look stupid. The person that often what happens is the person that assumes that they know everything is actually the stupid person. The
True.
the
True.
wise man
It's
will
okay to
always
say I don't
ask.
know. Yeah.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with that. And um,
Yeah.
if you say, I think when you don't know, there's one of two options. One is, can you figure it out yourself? If you can, do
Mm.
it. That is your
Mm.
job. If you can't figure it out, then ask for help. So 100%, there's nothing wrong with asking for help
Yeah.
if you can't figure something out.
Yeah. And I guess from like a manager or from the employer perspective, it's less about saying hearing yes all the time, right? I think it's about the can do attitude. So instead of saying I have to say yes all the time. I feel like it's more important to present a can-do attitude of like, I will take on the task, I'm going to ask questions, I'm going to take on a challenge, if it's a challenge, and see if there's anything that you can do that is not within your current job's scope, especially if you're an intern or if you're just starting out your career. It's always the attitude that counts, instead of you saying the word yes. So
Yeah.
for anyone who, want to see what is the best way to approach it, maybe shifting that mindset of thinking that you have to say yes to, I'm going to show the attitude of, it's like a this can do, I will try attitude, will
Yeah.
probably be helpful to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just on the other side, I would just like to say, if
Mm.
you're someone who has a lot on your plate already, and someone comes to you and gives you more work, you can ask them, is this a priority? And you can explain the work that you already have that you're currently working on. And, I hear this a lot. So, like, one of my colleagues will probably say, hey, I'm working with this team on all these things. We need to get this out by tomorrow because the ABC is waiting for this in order to do their role, etc. So, knowing all of this, would you like me to focus on this right now, or would you like me to do this on,
Reprioritize.
or yeah, do you want me to do it later this week, or would you like me to take it to someone else and get it done for you? I can still be responsible for the work, but do you mind if I pass this to ABC in the company to do that? There's nothing wrong with that. Again,
Good advice.
no,
Vinay,
absolutely.
good advice.
There's nothing wrong with that because
Mm,
not everyone will know what everyone's always up to, and
mm,
you might look like you're not busy, but you might just be there thinking about something because you have a
mm,
particularly large project on hand, and so there's nothing wrong with explaining what you're working on, giving them some context, and then saying, knowing this information, do you still want me to focus on this right now? If they say
mm.
yes, then the onus is on them because they're then taking responsibility for
Yeah.
the delay in the other work. This is not about shifting blame, but this is just about a very realistic scenario in terms of what happens in workplace every day. And
Mm,
if you can't do something because let's be real, if you are an intern or if you're fairly junior in a company, there's there is an assumption, or at least there's kind of a expectation rather, that you would say yes when someone senior in the company gives you something, but they might not fully understand the work that you're
mm.
involved in. They might be working with another partner, another manager, and they have a
Yeah.
very serious or very important task that the overall task the manager might be aware of, and so they understand the
Mm.
seriousness of it, but they probably just don't realize what you're doing for that task or that role. And then sorry, my notification just came in. As I,
That's why I
lesson
asked you to
101,
meet you.
lesson 101 in terms of recording a podcast, like, mistake. Like, I should have turned this off.
You should have
But
turned this off.
I turn off, even when I turn off all my notifications, my co-founder's notifications on, and he just messaged me. That's the reason. I never
Okay.
switch off his notifications. So, so that's why I always take a second to read it when he messages me. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
coming
always
back to
urgent.
the
I do that. I do that with your message.
yeah,
It doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I see your message, it does not matter. I would check.
so this is what I mean, where there are colleagues that you perhaps uh, like, I might be messaging you in a meeting. To someone else, it might look like you're distracted. As an example, they don't have the full information, and what they might not realize is, like, actually your boss is messaging you about something that's really important, and whatever else can wait because that might be important. Assuming that your boss doesn't like send you memes all day, and it is actual
Assuming.
assuming there's a big assumption,
There are
but
some fun bosses, maybe.
I'm
Um,
kind of offended by that now.
all right, moving on to the next Reddit story. The
I
next
quit this
story.
podcast.
Oh, you quit before me? I'm lasting. It's like 40 minutes in, and I'm still here. I'm still standing. You can do this
I'm
too,
not.
Vinay.
I
We
am.
can stand each other for more than 40 minutes.
Okay,
We
fine.
can do
Let's go.
this.
Let's do this. Let's soldier on.
Next one is actually something that I struggle with at the beginning too. So let's talk about it. Um, Also, again, from someone who deleted their account, not sure what you have published for you to delete your account, but here we go. Don't prioritize passion over salary. A job is a job. Your passion for it won't mean shit when you can't afford to pay bills or retire. When a workplace is toxic, start to plan your exit plan ASAP. Don't wait for it to blow up in your face.
100%. I think that's really good advice. Uh,
Mm,
yeah, passion definitely does not put food on the table unless you have
mm.
very rich parents who are willing to pay for everything, which most of us don't. And jokes aside, yeah, passion alone doesn't fuel, like, you can't
The
live on
hardest
passion.
part, yeah, but the hardest part is you still want to enjoy your job. You don't want to find a job that just pays the bill. So
Yeah.
like, I feel like for most people, and for me as well, when I was starting out trying to find, what I should do as my first job or what should I do for my internship. I know, like, I said, like, come from a marketing background and do like a marketing internship, but marketing is so broad. Like, there's so many
Mm.
things in marketing, and even picking marketing was hard.
Mm.
um so yeah, like, what do you think about balancing both, like having that, income, but also doing something that you enjoy?
I think in your early 20s, it's really important to find something that you are good at that people are willing to pay you for a fair amount. And I think a lot of people will say, follow your passion, follow this. I personally think that's BS. I personally think that that's assuming that everyone loves their job and everything's all like Disneyland. Uh, it's not. I think the reality is we have student loans to pay back. We have loans. We have we have rent to pay. We have got bills to pay. We've got all
Yeah.
the other things that come with life to pay, and someone needs to pay for all of those. And pay at the start of your career is obviously not going to be the best. Most people will
Mm,
probably end up doubling their salary in their 20s. So from their what they earn in their late 20s will probably be more double, if not more than that, compared to their early 20s. So in early 20s, like, it's difficult, especially if you're in a big city. It is very, very, very difficult because you've got all the expenses of being in a city and all the temptations of, like, great restaurants, great bars, going out, having a large group of friends, etc. And the ease of getting around as well. You can go to different places so quickly, and it's so easy that it's hard being in a big city in your early 20s, but that sets you up really well if you can get past that. And if you can find something that you're good at, and that this might take a few years, by the way, I'm not talking about a couple of weeks or a couple of months. It could take a few
mm,
years to figure out what you're good at. And the next part is the most important part, is getting someone to pay you for that and pay you a good salary for that is often
mm,
what a lot of people struggle with. I think I usually the next part to that would be like finding something you're good at, and finding something that you're good at is probably more important than finding something that you're passionate about. And the reality is that a lot of people, don't jump out of bed and, like, just open up their laptop and come online and start working. That's not what is expected. I think that's very unrealistic expectation. There are days where I don't want to
mm.
be at work, and I'm one of the founders. But I'm just being honest here. And there are days,
Yesterday, was it not the day before yesterday? You said you took a nap in the afternoon,
yeah, I went
and I
to
was
sleep
like,
at
"Thank
three
you for
o'clock.
sharing that."
I went to sleep at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was just
Mm,
super
mm,
tired. And
mm,
the reality is, you don't have to be passionate. Don't get me wrong. I really do love my work, and I'm very grateful for the work that I have. But um, to expect that for everyone, you got to realize some people just do the work for the salary that they earn. I'm
mm,
sure there are some exceptions to this, but I don't think all bin men love doing their job. Like, I'm pretty sure it's just like a means to an end for them, and that's the case for a
mm.
lot of people, and we just have to respect that. And I think I would love to find a passionate bin man. I don't think I'm yet to come across one. So I think selling that passion is
Mm,
very unrealistic. So
mm,
I think this person's absolutely right. Like, don't prioritize passion over salary. You still have bills
mm,
to pay. Your passion is not gonna. You can't take passion to your landlord.
mm.
You need to pay them in money, and so salary
Yeah.
is important. But I think
Mm,
there's a lot more nuance to this, right? Again, like, do you want to do a job that you absolutely hate but you get paid a lot for, or do you want to do a job that you don't mind, but it's a not bad salary either? That's the realistic scenario that a lot of people end up in. So there are lots of jobs that we know that often requires you to work 70, 80, 90 hours a week, but you're well compensated for that. And a lot of people do that not because they're passionate about it, but like, the compensation
Pays
is
the
worth
bill.
it. It pays the bills, and their bills might be bigger than ours, and that's fine.
Mm,
And that's what they do. I'm sure there are people
mm,
that are passionate about that kind of work as well, but I'm sure that
mm,
there's more than a minority that does it just for the compensation. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are people, take artists as an example. In your early stages of a career as an artist, if you go into anything that's arts related, I think every single study is showing like arts is the poorest paid graduate job.
yeah.
So if you study arts, it's often the hardest to kind of start your career in. Your salaries are often far, far lower than people that studied other degrees. And, and a lot of that is driven by passion, which I admire. I
Mm,
really do admire that. But re- reality is you got bills to pay, and you kind of have to start
mm.
focusing on things that do pay that.
Mm-mm. I came across a model called the PMS model, which is to look at your passion, look at the market, and look at your skills. And I actually, like, one of my professor told us about it. I was lucky enough to have a professor telling us about finding the right spot to, for our careers as a starting point. And I actually thought about how I can utilize my passion, and then how can I take a look at or develop my skills to match with a passion, and obviously matching with a gap in the market that is currently or will be in demand. So yeah, that's a really helpful model if you want to check it out. That might be, might help you to identify which area of the jobs that you can focus on after you graduate. And I guess it's the importance of doing an internship as well. Like, don't wait until you fully graduate to do an internship.
Yeah.
Do it while you are studying. I came across different people who studied different subjects when I was working at uni, and they always say that the job is not what they thought it would be
Mm,
when they were
yeah.
studying. So it's good to experiment. Like, is let's say, is UI UX the same as how you thought it would be? Do you have all of the freedom to do what you want, or maybe in a realistic world you have to listen to what your client wants and you
Yeah.
have to develop something that match with their needs, and stuff like that?
Absolutely.
And is that okay with you? For me as well, at least CP, it's funny. For people who doesn't know, Renee and Aaron doesn't know what I'm posting every day on social media.
I
They
have no
gave me
idea.
that freedom, gave me the freedom to do this, and I'm sure probably it's not going to be the case if I do move on to the next job, or, if I work with other companies, they might have requirements. But, again, it doesn't happen every day, and you do need to experiment, do that internship, and see if it's what you thought it would be.
Mm,
If it's not, it's okay to look for other options that is still matching with everything that you want. There's also like career aptitude tests that you can take, so
yeah.
just to see how you can,
I'm not too sure about that, to be honest.
how
But
come.
I did one when I was, I think, in first year of uni. He said I should be a helicopter pilot.
Oh, and you have a license as a pilot? No.
I'm studying. I would love to. I'm studying to, but that's not for a helicopter. But it basically said like I'm most suitable to have a career as a helicopter pilot. So I have mixed feelings about these kind of things. I think um,
Mm,
maybe the models have got a lot better over the years,
mm,
but also I think I would prefer to try something myself and then
mm.
make a decision rather than follow a some sort of AI engine's recommendation.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more data points that they don't consider that you might. So
Mm,
I think that's really important. So as you said, going back to the point that you said about doing internships, I fully understand. This sounds like we do have a vested interest to push for people to do more internships, but I genuinely believe that it offers so much to the people that do it. They get jobs a lot quicker. They know what they want to do. The thing is, if you're undergrad and in your summer vacation, if you try out internships, it's much easier to realize a lot of people do an internship will probably leave that industry because they realize it's very different to what they had in mind. And like fashion, arts, etc. These are all examples where they realize that it's very different. So I think
yeah.
there are a lot of people that study fashion designing, and as an example, and they come out at 21, 22, can't wait to kind of launch their first collection, and they realize that actually brands don't work that way. They want to kind of work for like a large company, large fashion house, and they realize that that's not how it works. And
No.
often that
Yeah.
reality only comes from working and seeing that for yourself. So again, like, you can watch and I was just going to say, you could watch a lot of TV series and they kind of give you a unrealistic expectation as to what you can expect. So you can never fully understand unless you go out and try it. But also with that is, I just want to add that one company's experience or your one experience doesn't necessarily have to be a reflection of the entire industry as well. So there's
Mm.
both sides to it. But I think most people are smart enough to realize, okay, I like this. I like the job that I'm doing, perhaps just not the company. And there are other people that really
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
um, the industry, but just not the job that they're doing, and so many other things. And it gives you that
Yeah.
flexibility. So if you're in a university where you can change your degree, as an example, after your first year, you might be studying biomedical sciences, and you just realize that you don't actually want to go into that area.
Mm.
You might realize you're a lot more passionate about something else, and then you're a lot more interested in something else, and you could switch your major, or you can switch your degree while on the back
Mm.
of an internship. The
Mm.
reality is the stakes are a lot lower when you're still in university. Once you graduate, life hits you. So you got rent to pay, you got all these expenses, and it's a
Yeah.
lot harder to switch jobs after that.
Mm. Yeah, no, I agree. But yeah, I'm gonna give the career aptitude test a go now that I do have a job to see if
Let me know. Let me know what it
I
says. What if it says like you should be like a, I don't know, like a veterinary doctor or like a rocket scientist or something? Like,
I feel
what would you
like
then do hypothetically?
it's the thing is, with these tests, it's helping me to identify, let's say for me, if I'm a creative or I am both creative and logical, but I need creativity in my job. So I know for a fact that anything that doesn't relate to creativity, I will not do as a day-to-day
Sure.
job. Unless I am like desperate and I need money. um,
We all do. We
well,
all
we,
do.
we have all been there. But lucky for me, I need something, that is creative.
Sure.
And at the same time I need a logical sense of approaching it. I'm not, like an artist where I can be fully creative. I do like to follow certain structure, and that's why I do marketing, because I feel like
Mm.
you are being creative based on a lot of research and a
Yeah.
lot of findings you do yourself, and then you analyze them, and then you can go free about how you want to do it. As
Mm.
an example, like if we want to, let's say for CP, right, we want to attract people to apply for international internships. And again, lucky for me, I am someone who is based off somewhere that is not my home country, not in China. I'm currently in the UK, and I understand where this is coming from. So you
Mm.
understand your customers, you understand what you are selling, you understand the market, and maybe the current market as well. You do all the research, and now you have to come up with a campaign. There
Mm.
are a trillion ways you can do this campaign, and that's
100%.
where we can get creative about it.
I agree.
So I
Really
guess,
good.
yeah, I would like to do the test, and I would like to see what they say I should do.
Okay. Follow us on
Before,
Instagram,
yeah.
and Angel will
Mm.
share the screenshot from that on
Oh my
Instagram.
god, really?
You have to put it out there. It's out there now, so you have to. All the listeners, every single one of them is wondering now what it says about Angel. So
I would like to know yours. I don't know if you have like always been
I think
an
I'll break the
entrepreneur.
system. I think I'll just break. No, I told you I got a helicopter pilot. This is 10 years ago, by the way, but maybe it's
Yeah,
time for me to
yeah.
redo it.
But you were doing like a law degree by then. So
I was.
you were also, yeah.
Can you imagine how confusing that must have been for me?
Should I be a pilot or should I be a lawyer?
Or should I
Or
start
should
my own?
I
Yeah, the
your
side
my
hut.
own company?
Yeah, there you go.
Mm,
So, yeah, that was my life.
yeah. But it's, that's kind of reflects back to saying how confusing it is to so many people, when they are doing the degree and thinking about what they should do as their first job. It's a
Mm.
very confusing time, and it's normal to be confused.
Yeah.
It's
No,
very
I agree.
normal.
I agree. I think so much in I think in society it's expected that you just have your shit figured out. Excuse my French,
Mm,
but it's completely okay to not have that. life is a journey, like, and very rarely do people stick to the same job now. Like, maybe our grandparents did a job for life, but right
Yeah.
now, so many people, you might start, I don't know, you might study law in uni and then go work, start a company. It may or may not have worked out. Maybe a few years later, you do a coding boot camp and then you become a programmer for a couple of
Mm,
years. You figure something
mm,
out, then you might start another company. Maybe that works out or doesn't work out. Then,
mm,
if it works out, you sell the company for millions and then you maybe become a VC or you become a full time
mm,
angel investor. And then after that, you become a full time grandparent, maybe. I don't know. Like, what I'm trying to say is, like, it's not
mm.
a very linear graph where it just goes like it's not, your career doesn't always have to make
Yeah.
sense. It's a journey where at that particular point in time it just works for you, and
Mm,
if it does, that's great. Like, doesn't
mm,
matter. So yeah, that's my advice.
mm. To wrap up the episode, I kind of promised that we are both going to share one of our biggest fail of our career story. Um,
Can't
we
wait to
have to
hear
agree that
yours.
we are not going to mine. You already know mine. I guess. I hope. I don't know. I'm gonna share mine. I'm gonna share
Okay.
mine. So when I first started, because I started as a social media assistant at
Mm.
CP, and it's also my first
Ooh, wait,
serious
can I
job
just say,
ever.
you're very brave of you to pick like your biggest career mistake with your current employer while you're speaking to your current employer. So
Yeah,
let's just
yeah.
acknowledge that for a
Because you
second.
are the one. You are the
And
one
then
who told me that was so bad.
okay, let's carry on.
Yeah.
Let's carry on.
So when I first joined, and I've been obviously I I run all the social media accounts and everything, and it's my first job. I was really excited, and I was overexcited. I was trying to make everything perfect, streamlined from the beginning to the end of a post. I look at all the design. I probably accidentally rebranded CP, just because I was like, yeah, there's a better way to do this. I think nobody said no, so I went ahead and do all of that. And out of all of these stuff that I like, the grand plan I have for social media channels, because at the time we didn't have much on the channel. I want to develop reels. I want to do TikTok. I want to have more posts. I wanted the design to be better. I want the branding to be better. I make grammatic and typos on
Hmm.
posts, right? And it just felt like
I
all the hard
vaguely
work that I
recall
put
this.
in
I vaguely recall this.
it's my biggest fault, because I feel like for all the hard work and the plans that we have, and
Hmm.
I made the fundamental mistakes.
Hmm.
Not once, not twice, three times.
What did they say about three strikes?
Three
What
times.
happens after three strikes?
And it's like, and I was like really, really angry at myself
Hmm.
because, you know, with all the plans that we have, and it's almost like they wouldn't make sense if I make such fundamental mistakes. Like, people should be able to read what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
And I also feel like it triggers a part of me thinking, this is my second language. I'm not going to be able to do this job forever because it's not my first language. There will be mistakes that I probably won't be able to pick up, that just the end of my career. It's not that deep now that I
Hmm.
think about it, because now I'm a manager now and I have a team now. There are other things that I need to work on. But still, at the time, it just felt like, you know, it's your second language. And why are you making such fundamental mistakes? And having that 99% ready, but that 1% is just screw everything up.
Yeah.
And it also made me focus on the mistakes
Hmm.
and not realizing the fact that when the third time, the third strike, when you sent me a message and I was really angry at myself, I didn't even focus on the fact that I hit my first 2000K views video ever on
Hmm.
CP history. I did not focus on that. I was like, that's a failure. I did not focus on the win. I did not focus on maybe some plan actually worked.
Hmm.
And obviously you asked me to focus on the action points and the things I can use, the tools I can use to avoid them.
Hmm.
But yeah, like, I've learned to triple check my content, and that's something you would never know if you don't do this job.
Yeah.
Because normally, you go about your day and you go about posting stuff, you don't think about it, and you can only learn by actually doing it and making that mistakes. And
This
I also
goes.
joined like a
Sorry, go on.
Mhm.
Sorry, I thought. Sorry, no,
Oh,
no, sorry. Go on.
I was gonna say, like, I also joined like a social media network, and trying to see like how that can, just improve in general, because I realized there are so many
Hmm.
things that I could improve on. And a lot of social media managers shared that they also get panic attack if they see a content that they posted, even if they have checked, has typos. And I was like, oh, I wasn't the only one. It wasn't because it's my, I don't know, third language, second language. It wasn't because, I'm just this kind of person who is careless. Sometimes it happens, and I need someone to tell me that happens, and I need to fix it because I do represent a company. The content that I post do
Yeah.
represent the entire company. So it's a huge learning curve for me, and that was my first 6 months at CK.
So a couple of things from that. One is um, often like the output is almost like an iceberg, right? Like 90% of the work that's gone into it, people don't see. It's that 10%. And you kind of feel like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, I spent hours, days, weeks on this piece of content. But what they see is that 10-second video or that 20-second TikTok or that one post
Mm-hmm.
where there's a mistake, and all the emphasis on the mistake rather than everything else that's gone into it up until that point. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's natural for that to happen, and it's very natural for people to kind of focus on the mistake rather than the thing. But I think sometimes you kind of have to also tell yourself that I could do all of this work, but then the thing that actually the output that people do see, that needs to be what I need to make sure is meeting my
Yeah.
standards. So
Yeah.
what's below the water in terms of an iceberg doesn't matter, but what's above, what people see, is what really matters.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I think
Mm.
it's very natural to be upset about like a mistake, especially when you have very high standards for yourself. But it's also equally important to kind of like say, okay, there's no point dwelling on about the mistake. It's like, okay, what's the first thing that we can do? Let me take
Yeah.
that post down. Let me redo it, republish it. This was what, over 2 years ago, right? This
Yeah.
happened over 2 years ago.
Mm.
And in the grand scheme of things, I barely remember this, let alone like any of our followers. So I think
Yeah.
it's what I need the listeners to understand is that a mistake might seem like the end of the world at that moment in time, but in a few hours, days, often it's a few hours, people have forgotten about it. In the grand scheme of things, nobody gives a shit. Like, but
Yeah.
the thing is, it
Mm.
doesn't mean that that mistake can keep happening, but
Yeah.
very rarely does, unless you're a surgeon. Uh, a mistake doesn't often cost lives, and it's the impact of
Mm.
it is not that big in the grand scheme of things, and it's okay. You learn from that. But what that's
Mm.
also led is, I think, the most important point, which is basically you now have systems in place to check what's
Yeah.
getting get put out. And I think that if anyone else in the company posted, so obviously you're a manager now, you have people that report to you. If someone posted with some mistakes on there, I think you will probably be a much better manager as a back of that result, because you kind of
Yeah.
understand what it takes. But at the same time,
Yeah.
you're still responsible for the content that gets put out. So you can't
Mm.
have mistakes that's going out left, right, and center. But at the same time, you understand and you know how to perhaps help our colleagues with that. And I think that's really
Yeah.
important. So
Yeah.
um
I do actually learn a lot from that, and learn about how to give that feedback, and also understand how they might feel, like they might
mm,
feel if that happens. What about you, Vinay? Come on, share your biggest
whew,
mistake.
I've got so many. I
So
actually have so many mistakes. Where would I'm not even sure where to even start. I genuinely uh
pick one for
I
us.
have like, I'm just trying to think. Okay, wh- I'm trying to think of something that will be useful for our listeners. So if you're someone in your
Mm.
early 20s, um I was doing a lot, and I thought that you kind of have to. Okay, so one of the mistakes I probably did quite early on in my career was that I was doing a bit too much of everything, basically. So
All right.
for
Mm.
anyone that's listened to this that don't know my story, I studied law, and while I was at university and towards the end of our first year, my best friend back then is now my co-founder. We started this company. So this was 11 years ago. And at that point, I was studying law. I was trying to finish my degree in 2 years rather than three, because my university offered an option to study over the summer. And so effectively, instead of having doing 2 semesters for 3 years, we could do 3 semesters for 2 years. So I was trying to do that. I started this company. I was also the Students' Association president. I was also the captain of the cricket team there. I was part of so many clubs and societies where I had responsibilities there, etc. And I was doing all of this, and I was just doing so much. And what I realized is, like, you don't need to do all of this. You don't need to. I genuinely enjoyed doing those things at that time. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people that do, I didn't find it overwhelming at any point. But what I realized is there's only so much that I can do. And ultimately, you get stretched too thinly across too many things, and you become, at best, average, worst case scenario, just pathetic at the things that you're doing. And I think it's true. It's true. And like, on top of all of this, I'm a son. I had a girlfriend at the time who's now my wife. You're a boyfriend, you're a son, you're a sibling, you're a friend to loads of people, and all of those are equally important as well. And I think from a personal perspective, I think I wish I kept in touch with a lot more people at that point. These are things that, it's a bit like juggling. If you can juggle 7 things at a time, once you start adding the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, you might still be able to juggle 7 things, but things will get dropped. And sometimes you don't get a choice in terms of what you drop. And some of those things could be quite important to you. You might not realize it at that point in time, but later on you do. So I think it's important to have like a few key areas to focus on. And it's also really important, especially in your early 20s, to kind of keep in touch with friends, family, etc., which I think we sometimes often forget about while we are starting our careers and start realizing, you have, a lot of people have high school friends, they have uni friends, they have work friends, and they have other friends from outside of these 3 kind of main circles. And to maintain all those relationships is quite difficult. So it's just finding that balance, basically. And I think over the years, I've got better at it. I'm still not there where I would say I'm like really happy with the balance I have in my life, but I'm getting better at it. And I think saying this to a social media manager is quite funny, but getting off social media was one of the things that really kind of like helped a lot, because I realized that I was spending a lot more time than I really knew. I didn't realize how much time I was spending on there. So all that time I was getting back, it really was helpful for me. And obviously I don't do social media for a living. Obviously it'll be very difficult for you to obviously get off social media, but for me, that was really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think that is a valid mistake and advice to give. Because I remember I have to make decisions between do what and not do something, and then there's a cost to that, and there's sacrifices, opportunity on things. Cost. And then yes, opportunity cost. So this is a really, really good advice, but unfortunately, obviously, this is all the time that we have. There are still some Reddit stories that we couldn't go through today, and I really hope if
what's the spicy stuff? You promised me spicy stuff. This is mild AF.
This is too mild. But if you like this, guys, if you do like this and you like Vinay being on the show and talk for hours,
I'm coming back to take a job, Angel. I'm coming back to take my job back.
Yeah. I was gonna say I lost the competition, but I feel like I just go back to the losing competition for photo competition between me and Vinay. He's taken a photo of me, and more people like that photo than the photo I've taken of him. And I am just still, I can't believe that happened.
So where can they see that? So where can they see that? Just so that people can fully see my masterpiece.
I have deleted it. It's gone from the internet forever. But yes, I am actually making Your Day in the Life, Vinay. Your Day in the Life in New York. I'm writing a script, and it's just making me laugh. I was writing it on the tube yesterday, and it made me laugh so much. I'm gonna release it hopefully soon. But yeah, I guess people can see what happened there. In that video. But on that note, thank you so much for listening today, and thank you, Vinay, for joining us. And I do hope there's a part 2 to this. You can subscribe to our channel. You can visit us on our Instagram, Capital Placement. Subscribe for Vinay. Give him that ego boost so he knows, he knows that he's welcome.
I'm not on social media.
I'm pretty sure you use CP social media. I'm pretty sure.
No, why would I use CP social media?
I need to get it on the tape. I
have no idea what you're talking about. But anyway, as Angel was saying.
Anyways. Sorry, Vinay, you go ahead.
I was just no, I was just saying you were saying follow us where.
Thank you so much. Yes, follow us on Instagram. More followers means I hit my KPIs, mean more shows, means happy people. So yeah, thank you so much for your support, and we hope to see you in the next episode as well. And Merry
Thanks, Angel.
Christmas. I
Thank you.
think by the time this episode releases, it's Christmas. All right. Bye, everyone.